It is again with great pleasure and excitement that I introduce our next speaker, our dear colleague and friend from Skopje, Republic of Macedonia, Dr. Zorica Trajkova, who is a professor at St. Cyril and Methodius University of Skopje. Zorica is again a very active member of our network. She's been with us for many years, participated in various activities. She's also a regular visitor, academic visitor to University of Łódź, yes, and she is very much in political discourse, analyze or helping us understand what is going on there, and how politicians communicate or what is going on there. This will be another presentation in that area, so I'm personally also very excited and would like to hear more about it. So more on political discourse, establishing identity and interacting with the audience. Zorica, over to you.
Thank you. Hello everyone. I was motivated by the premise that the way speakers involve themselves and the audience into the discourse reveals the perception they have of their own role in the political party that they represent and the society as a whole, and the perception they have of the audience, of their potential voters, and their relationship with them. I also think that my research shows and will show what kind of speech are voters tolerant to. I assume that they are more tolerant towards the speech of those they vote for. Therefore, consequently, there should be more people who are tolerant to the people who win the elections. So my aim in this presentation is to investigate how American Macedonian presidential candidates establish their identity and actively engage the audience into the argumentation in the pre-election campaign speeches through the use of self-mentions and engagement markers as metadiscourse categories. Of course, political discourse is very interesting for analysis, especially pre-election political campaigns, because it is they're the texts where which should be very persuasive, because the speakers try to persuade the audience to vote for them there and to present themselves and their party in the best possible manner, while present the opponents in a not that good way. So I adopted Highland's classification of metadiscourse. I particularly focused on two types of interpersonal markers: self-mentions, which I used to establish the author's identity. I analyzed the usage of first-person pronouns and possessive adjectives, I, me, mine, and exclusive we, our, and ours. Exclusive meaning speakers exclude the audience from the discourse. And engagement markers, which should help the speakers to establish and maintain rapport with the listeners. And I analyze here personal pronouns, inclusive we, you, and your, direct address, and questions and directives, mainly imperatives. I analyzed 12 speeches all in all, so the corpus is not that big, but it just gives some indication of how things are standing. So I analyzed 6 speeches from the American elections. American elections happen every 4 years, so the last ones were in 2016. So we had Donald Trump and Clinton in 2012, Obama and Romney in 2008, Obama and McCain. You can see that Republicans, in my corpus, Republicans won once and Democrats won twice. While as for the Macedonian corpus, the elections happen every 5 years, so I also selected 6 speeches. From 2014, Ivanov and Pendarovsky, 2004, Crvenkovsky and Kerev, and 1999, Trajkovsky and Petkovsky. There are 2 parties in Macedonia. One is VMRO, the other one is Social Democratic Party, and you can see that VMRO wins twice in my corpus. So why did I choose this corpus? Why did I choose to compare Americans and Macedonians? Because I find some ideological similarities between the parties. For instance, Republicans and VMRO are both right-wing parties. They're oriented more towards Christian values. They want to achieve liberal capitalism, lower the taxes, lower the social and health benefits. Therefore, more liberal trade, and they want to lower the interference of the government. While Democrats are very close in their ideology with Social-Democrats from Macedonia, so they're both left-wing parties, and they aim to achieve bigger health and social rights, civil society, and higher interference of the government. So my hypotheses were that there will be difference in the usage of these markers among the politicians within each corpus and between the two corpora, Macedonian and American. I thought that those who win the elections would use these both types of markers more frequently, and the markers used will have different semantic references. So if you take a look at the usage of self-mentions, in the American corpus, you can see that they were most frequently used by Obama and Clinton. What's common for both speakers is that they strive to get a second mandate. Clinton used to be a Secretary of State, so now she wants to be a president, and Obama also used to be a president, now he wants to be a president again, and they both belong to the Democratic Party. As for the Macedonian corpus, you can see that Crvenkovski and Trajkovski use these self-mentions most frequently, and they both strive to get a second mandate. What I would like to mention here is that in the Macedonian corpus, I not only counted the usage of I, for instance, as a personal pronoun, because in Macedonian, you can use just the verb because the person is coded in the verb form, so you can just say work, not I work. So I thought that there would be, that speakers would have some intentions behind their speech when they actually use both the explicit form and the verb. So if you take a look at the overall results, you can see that Americans use self-mentions more frequently than Macedonians, and the winners use them more frequently than the losers. I'm sorry for the term, I don't think that they are losers, but they just lost the elections, but that was the shortest term that I could use. It's just that Macedonian candidates used, the winners used it more frequently than those who lost. If you take a look at the distribution of the self-mentions by within the political parties, you can see that the Democrats use them more frequently, which is understandable because both Obama and Clinton strive for a second mandate, so they want to mention what they have actually done in their previous mandate, and that's why they mentioned themselves so much. I also took a look at the verbs and whatever follows the self-mention to see what is it that they actually focus on when they mention themselves. In the American corpus, I could notice that everybody talks about themselves. Those who had some political function before talked about what they did in their previous mandate, while, for instance, others talk what they did in their life. For instance, Trump talks about his businesses and his children and so on. I also noticed that those who win use know or believe as intensifiers, while those who lose use hedges after the first person pronoun. They also use the on-take will, and they say, I will fight, I will offer, I will help, I will invest. Although you can notice, for instance, that Clinton uses will kind of negative rhetorics like I will fight, I will oppose, I'm never going to let, which probably voters do not really tolerate. And finally, they promise something to the audience, and they commit themselves to do something, and they ask or invite the audience to vote for them. When they use the first person plural pronoun, they actually mostly refer to their party and themselves, or to their opponent and themselves. As for the Macedonian politicians, they don't really use personal talk, except for those politicians who strive to get the second mandate. Then they talk about what they did in the previous mandate. They also use boosters or intensifiers, like I know, I'm convinced. They also use the on-take will, I will defend and secure, and so on. And finally, they also invite the audience to vote for them. As for the usage of first person plural pronoun, it's similar to the American. They actually refer to their party and themselves, or the government they worked for and themselves when they actually use it. Now, taking into consideration the fact that language should be economical, I wanted to investigate when is it that Macedonian politicians use this double form first person singular plural pronoun plus a verb. And I translated the examples. They use it on several occasions. First, when they want to present themselves as reliable persons who do not run away when it gets tough. Usually those who have already been in power, like I have never run away, I have never been afraid of any risks. When it was tough, I was here, and in 1992 I was here, in 1994 I was here, and so on. Then they want to build credibility, like I know, I can do that. Then when they want to identify themselves with the audience, like I'm an original Macedonian. When they want to present themselves as people with vision, they say I have a dream. Or when they want to compare themselves with the opponent, they say I speak, for instance, with another tone, while the other person speaks with a different, probably bad tone. And this wasn't planned, but I just couldn't resist it. And I did a short analysis of when is it that they use third-person reference. And I noticed that Americans use it a bit more frequently than Macedonians. Trump and McCain use it the most. I could notice that Trump uses kind of hate speech when he speaks about Hillary. He's really linguistically intolerant. He uses such bad words like she's corrupt and conniving, aligned, and so on. But voters probably seem to be very tolerant towards this linguistic intolerance because he won. McCain, when he talks about Obama, he actually talks about his policies and he's not that negative about him. What's interesting about Macedonian politicians is that when they speak about their opponent, they actually speak about their opponents rather than opponent. They don't talk about a specific person, but they just talk about the policies of the other party. Then I analyzed the usage of engagement markers. As you can see, again, Clinton and Obama seem to use these engagement markers more frequently than the other politicians. You can just notice that Obama uses the inclusive we more frequently, while Clinton uses the direct address more frequently than Obama. As for the Macedonian corpus, you can see that all these presidential candidates who belong to the same party, the Socio-Democratic Party, which is similar to the in ideology with the Democrats, they use these markers more frequently. So there can be some connection probably which needs further investigation. So I just separately looked at the usage of inclusive we, our, and us because I think it's a really good persuasive strategy because speakers include listeners into the discourse as if they agree with them. And their usage lowers the potential risk of listeners' objection. As you can see, American candidates again use inclusive we more frequently than Macedonian candidates. What's interesting is that those who lost the elections, especially in the Macedonian corpus, use inclusive we more. But those would be the Socio-Democrats. The corpus was limited. I had two candidates from the other party who won. So if the corpus was larger, maybe the results would have been different. So I just want to mention the semantic references that the inclusive first-person plural pronouns had. First, they had a more generic reference, so we mostly refers to we, the Macedonians, or we, the Americans. Or us and our are almost always used in this sense, like our country, our economic system, our laws, and so on. In Macedonian, first-person plural pronoun and verb in the first person is used usually with this reference when the person wants to defend the country or the party and to strengthen the feeling of the audience of belonging to a union. For instance, I expect that our neighbors wouldn't interfere in our internal politics. We can take a good care of ourselves. So it seems like the audience will now definitely feel like they belong to this group. The second semantic reference was that they can refer to the speaker and the listeners present. So you and I, when speakers say we, they mean you and I directly. For instance, come this November, you and I or we can bring America back. As I said before, I analyzed separately the direct address with you and your. Smith considers it to be the most interactive form among personal pronouns since it explicitly acknowledges the presence of the listeners, although in some cases it seems offensive because it separates listeners as a different group from the speakers. I myself felt a bit like that when I heard the President Trajkova say, the main issue here is the improvement of your economical situation. You can improve it only if you vote for us. So I thought, how about your economical situation? So the results show that, again, Americans use it a little bit more than Macedonians, but it seems that voters do not really tolerate the usage of this direct you very much because it seems that those who lost actually used it more frequently. And in this case, those would be Democrats and Socio-Democrats. They use you more frequently because probably it is in their ideology to consider everybody equal, so it might be connected to their ideology. Again, you and you had 3 semantic references. The first one was similar to the indefinite pronoun 1, when they refer to people in general, including the speaker and the listener. That's what you do when you're out of ideas, for instance, but it had much lower usage in both corpora. The other one was direct address to the audience when they want to engage them in the argument. And it was most frequently used in both corpora. In Macedonian, the use of explicit pronoun you plus verb in second person was used mostly with this semantic reference. For instance, I'm now addressing all the Turks, Serbs, Romas. You are the Macedonia's ethnic treasure. So direct address to them. And the hidden you in imperatives or directives. It was used more frequently in American speeches, mostly by Obama and McCain. Hyland talks about 3 types of directives, physical, cognitive, and textual. In my corpus, there were physical and cognitive and some borderline cases. Physical directives when the speaker actually tries to urge the audience to do something physically, like don't boo, vote by Obama, or come this November, or get registered. And cognitive when they ask them to think about certain processes, like be convinced, never forget. And there were some borderline cases. They look like they are physical, but they're actually mental, like fight for a new direction for your country, stand up to defend your country, and so on. Last, I analyzed the usage of questions. They're also considered to be a persuasive strategy when the speakers actually indirectly try to make voters or the audience agree with the presented arguments. It was used mostly by the American speakers, preferred by McCain and Romney. And it was used by some Macedonian speakers. Kedev used them the most. But it is interesting that none of them wins the elections, though. So it seems that speakers should balance the usage of questions. So they shouldn't use that many questions. So in the examples, the speaker either hints at the answer or simply gives it. So if you take a look at the overall distribution, you will see that both Macedonians and Americans prefer personal reference, then inclusive pronouns, and then direct address. So the tendency is the same. It's just that the Americans use them a little bit more than Macedonians. There was not really much difference. The winners did use, in general, these markers a little bit more than those who lost, but there is not really much difference. The difference is that in the, as I said, in the parties who share the same ideology, it seems that Democrats and Socio-Democrats use this personal reference more frequently than Republicans and Vomero. So my conclusion would be that my first hypothesis proved right. There was difference in the usage of the markers among politicians within the corpus and between the two corpora. The second hypothesis proved partially correct. Winners did not use the markers more frequently, always. There were differences. And the third hypothesis proved correct. The markers used had different semantic references. I'm sorry to take your time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much.